Good afternoon, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. This session is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, the Honorable Chamber was in the Standing Finance Committee. We now revert to that committee.
This Honorable House is now in Standing Finance Committee. When we suspended for lunch, Honorable Member for St. Andrew, you were on your second question. You'd ask your first question. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was answering the question asked by the Honorable Member, I indicated that the Chief Technical Officer of the Ministry would also speak, Mr. Gregson Haynes, and I'm asking that he can speak to address some of the matters that were inquired about.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Greg Sahin, Senior Technical Officer, Technical Management Services. As Senior Minister Walker would have mentioned before, as it relates to, we plan as a ministry to upgrade 7 of the polyclinics and rebuild 2. However, this will spill over into, as the Honorable Member, Mr. Springer would have mentioned, the outpatient clinic in St. Andrew and the one in St. Joseph as well. So works are in plan to get those retrofitted and upgraded. Okay. Speaking to the issues we would have at some of the polyclinics, we realized that they're cramped for space. We would have had some structural issues, and we would have realized that because of the high volume of patients, they now have heated patient areas. So the approach of the ministry is to create a better environment in many of the clinical spaces. And this would be to expand the plant depending on the physical size of the plant. We may have to go 2 stories up, or we may have to go on the footprint of the plant in some instances. The goal of the ministry is to upgrade many of the bathrooms and the amenities to be disabled friendly, implement water and energy saving devices. We would have plans to, as I said, cool some of the patient area by way of extractor fans, ceiling fans, depending on the clinic itself. Some clinics are vented by natural air, some are fully AC, similar to Bramford Tate. The goal of the ministry also is to provide some electrical upgrades in many of the clinical spaces. Some of the emergency rooms, we realize that a lot of the infrastructure is aged and definitely needs attention. So as a whole, and as a ministry, that is what our goals are. In reference to what we have achieved thus far, we have cool many patient areas and doctor areas, so similarly at David Thompson and currently ongoing at Bramford Tate Polyclinic. With respect to, we will soon have the pharmacy reopen at St. Philip District Hospital, which was closed for some time. We will reopen the laundry department at St. Philip and work is currently ongoing there as well. We are retrofitting bathrooms as we speak at Eunice Gibson, Edgar Cochrane, and St. Philip Polyclinic. We realized that these bathrooms have been missing and have been some handrails, devices that would assist the elderly, some grab bars, and we realized that this is paramount and we will put this into place as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. And just let me say that I'm certainly very proud and happy to see you in your new capacity. I'm sure the people of Barbados are very thankful and grateful for the upgrades that are coming to the various health facilities right across the board. My next question has to do with specifically with the Polyclinic, the outpatients clinic in Belle Plaine. I've had complaints on more than one occasion where persons using that clinic, that facility, complain about not being able to have access to their medication. Medication was not being dispensed to patients because there was no security on duty. So my question is there a policy within the Ministry of Health that states that unless security is present at these satellite facilities, that medication cannot be dispensed? If there's a policy, if that applies to just that particular facility in Belle Plaine, or if that's a policy right across the board.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I don't know of any such policy, but I would ask the Acting Director of the Barbados Drug Service to address that question. Ms. Dolores Maskell.
Good afternoon, honorable members. Dolores Maskell, Acting Director, Barbados Drug Service. So I have spoken with the pharmacist that is assigned to St. Andrew Outpatients Clinic, and what she has told me is that there is no such policy, but what happens is sometimes patients become aggressive, and so to ensure the safety of the staff, it is preferred that the security officer be on duty before the clinic opens. So we have the pharmacist on duty, and the clinic opens early. The maid is there to open the door early and everything, and everybody's on duty. But until the security is there, it seems as though the patients aren't allowed inside the clinic. So if the pharmacist is to serve the patients, she has to go outside to the clinic and collect and come back in. She doesn't have the authority to let the patients into the clinic.
I hear what you say. I've passed there a number of occasions, and I can understand that maybe when persons get aggressive, people can be aggressive at any point in time, any place. But I don't think that because persons might have been aggressive in the past, that is reason sufficient that a policy or decision is made or taken that persons who are sick in need of medication cannot access that medication because the security officer is not in place. And I've seen many of the patients who use that facility are patients well in their 60s and 70s. I don't see a lot of young people using the facility, to be honest. A lot of the elderly in that community who cannot do any better, who cannot get into town and get into Spikestown, they use that facility because it's convenient to do so. But for a decision to be made based on, I don't know how many cases that the pharmacists would have experienced where persons became aggressive. I do not even know what was the reason why the person or the persons became aggressive on that occasions or those occasions. But I do not believe that in itself should be reason enough to deprive so many other persons of their medication.
I do not know that a decision was taken by the pharmacist because, as I said, the pharmacist doesn't have. We did a stock taking exercise there about 2 weeks ago, and we had to get the key from the Eunice Gibson Polyclinic. We do not have access to that clinic. The pharmacist is. So we have to wait for somebody to open the door. So therefore, if nobody opens the door, then we can't get him either. That is all I'm saying.
But I must say that this is unacceptable. Certainly is unacceptable that.
Minister, I have spoken with the MOH with responsibility for that clinic, and what she has said is that there was an incident some time ago. And I do not know if maybe one incident resulted in fear, and so this is what was said, but it is not at the pharmacy's end.
Mr. Chair, I think the PS should speak at this time.
Wayne Marshall, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health and Wellness. Now, the ministry's primary goal, and by extension that of the polyclinics and the pharmacies, is to ensure that all visitors are safe from harm. And in this regard, the security officers play a crucial role in ensuring that these visitors are protected from harm, and also any potential violence that may happen from patients visiting visitors or external threats. So there are government security guards stationed at every polyclinic to control access to that facility and to ensure that only authorized personnel and visitors can enter. There are also security guards that conduct regular patrols and surveillance in order to monitor all the areas and the facility. Now, there's no specific policy within the Ministry of Health and Wellness or the polyclinics or the pharmacy in which any particular care or service is denied from any visitor because the security guard is not there. I will need to investigate that matter to ensure what are the specific circumstances, but there's no official or specific rule or protocol with respect to persons not receiving any treatment or service when a security guard is not there. We normally try to ascertain that the medical officer of health is there, and then the medical officer of health can perform the role of ensuring that the person gets that service. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. I'm satisfied that this matter will be investigated and will not be repeated. My final question, thank you very much, ma'am. My final question has to do with vaccines in Barbados. Prior to the COVID pandemic, Barbados boasts of being one of, if not the country with the highest vaccination rate in the Caribbean. We're now seeing an increase in vaccine hesitancy. A lot of parents are openly stating that they will not have their children immunized. And we're also at the same time seeing an increase in preventable diseases, some of which have been eradicated from our shores many, many years ago. So my question is, given this rise in vaccine hesitancy, what is the ministry doing to pretty much to combat this view and to increase the awareness of how important the use of vaccines are to the general health of children and persons in the country? I know years ago, there used to be collaborations between the schools and the Ministry of Health. So I also would like to know in your answer if these collaborations are still in place.
Thank you, Honorable Member. This is indeed a very important matter you've raised. It's one that we are extremely concerned about in the ministry. It has all come the movement of anti-vaxxers, and it has, after COVID, it is now going to the normal immunization schedules that we have in the schools that we normally had in Barbados. There are persons who were immunized when they were children. As you're correct, our rates used to be in the 90s. And even before COVID, I think in 2018, watching the trends, you began to see a dip. And obviously it got worse during COVID. The ministry has relaunched the campaign. I'm going to ask shortly the CMO and the Chief Nursing Officer to both speak from their various perspectives on what is being done. But suffice it to say that the ministry is going after this quite aggressive. You're correct, there's some diseases like measles, which have not been seen in Barbados for decades. There's an outbreak of measles in Europe and North America. I believe also there's been at least one death from measles in Ireland, I believe it was. And we are concerned, especially with the approaching Cricket World Cup. We've been also working with the Ministry of Education as it relates to entry into schools. And we are also particularly concerned about the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, where you require 2 doses. We are about 90% coverage for the first dose, but I believe the ministry is extremely concerned about the second dose, which is in the high 70s, and this needs to be addressed. And I'm going to ask the CMO first to speak about it, and then this Chief Nursing Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth George, CMO. Barbados has one of the most comprehensive vaccine programs in the region. We not only offer MMR, we offer diphtheria, pertussis, human papilloma virus, hepatitis B, B, influenza. So we have a comprehensive program which we in the past have been given recognition for our program by PAHO. But as Minister said, just before COVID and after COVID, our rates have come down. And what we have been trying to do, one, Vaccine Week of the Americas is coming up shortly, and we usually strategize during that week, particularly trying to target defaulters. There is a greater public health presence with respect to public health nurses. We have recently gotten a bus that hopefully will do some community-based interventions with respect to defaulters and trying to find individuals who are not taking up the vaccine. Yes, it's an issue. We're going to have tremendous travel. People travel with their diseases, and it's important that the population, again, look at the good evidence that's available that vaccines tend to work in situations and they prevent diseases, and we will continue to work with the public to make sure that our levels come up slowly. We are seeing an increase in the first dose of MMR. We've seen a 5% increase in the first dose of MMR. But for the second dose, we are not where we are supposed to be. We are about 75%, and we need to be closer to 90% of the population. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Anastasia Jordan. I am the Acting Chief Nursing Officer in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. With regards to the question of the awareness, we are aware that there is a decrease in terms of the vaccine coverage in Barbados, and we have strategized in the primary healthcare system, specifically with public health, to go out into the communities, increase the presence of nurses in the communities and going into the schools. And as CMO mentioned, we recently launched a mobile clinic where we are targeting specific groups. We've just concluded a research with collaboration with PAHO and CDC looking at defaulters. So we have a list of those candidates who have not received their vaccines, and we're specifically targeting those to bring up the numbers. As you would know, we are on the verge of seeing measles outbreak within the region, so this is something that we're working very hard to ensure that we are ready and prepared with the influx of the tourists coming to Barbados for the upcoming World Cup event. But we're getting back into the schools, and we are strategically placing our nurses where they need to be. We have polyclinics open for the next couple of weeks on Saturdays to facilitate parents coming to the clinic that are not able to come during the week. So we're open to service the public and to increase the awareness of the need for those to get their children vaccinated, and it's an ongoing campaign, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. You have to, those PSAs, they're also very important. You don't want that anti-vaccine movement to take root in Barbados. It's being discussed at all levels, and the boldness at which persons are now openly defining, the need for vaccines. We can see the danger where it's heading. So ensure that within your thrust that there are some PSAs so you can reach persons right across the board. That is my final question, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you. Honorable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have just 2 questions, but I also wanted to make a brief comment and to thank the chairman of the board of the QEH for sharing so ably the mature and responsible approach to the issue of the selection of the new CEO. As a person who has a background in HR and in recruitment, I could appreciate the process that you have gone through, and I can also appreciate the fact that making a selection like that for a specialized post within a specialized institution is not as straightforward as some people may think it can be. There are some skills that are in abundance in a country to the extent that there might be a dime a dozen. And therefore, it is very, very easy in that context to decide that you're going to do all Barbadian because the skills are available. The unfortunate problem that we have in Barbados is only one hospital. So where would a Barbadian get the experience and expertise in the management of a hospital unless they've gone overseas and have spent a considerable time in somebody else's system, has learned to manage a hospital, and more importantly, for what we wish to accomplish here in Barbados, it is that you want someone who understands the change management process and has led an operation in change management in a specialized environment, such as a hospital. And therefore, you would have to cast your net wide, and as a responsible institution with the best interests in your heart for Barbados, you would have to choose the person who has the best qualifications and experience to safely lead us through this transition. Because if we botch it, we will compromise the health of Barbadians for generations. And therefore, I really want to applaud you for the approach that you have made. And Barbadians can have the confidence that whenever you're selecting someone for a position, your position is going to be who can offer us the best. And as long as Barbadians are present in that best, they will have their opportunity to be there. But other than that, we cannot compromise the health of Barbadians. The two areas that I am very concerned about is the backlog. As an MP, I have had the heartbreaking experience of having people come to my office who maybe were in need of surgery for a painful condition, who may have been in a position where they have limbs that are deteriorating. And because constantly, the operation is pushed back 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, etc. I know that this has to be unacceptable to you as people who care about Barbadians. It certainly is unacceptable to me as a Barbadian and as an MP. And so I know that you probably face a number of challenges. I know that these problems did not start yesterday, they did not start in 2018, but that these are chronic issues that have pursued us. So I wanted to find out where we are in terms of improving the access to surgeries and what are the forward plans for increasing the ability of Barbadians to get the care that they need, where they're not suffering deterioration because we simply don't have the capacity to respond.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, I want to thank you for your comments regarding the selection of a CEO. As it pertains to the matter, and it is certainly no annoying problem, and for us to, in the Ministry of Health and the QEH, the matter of the backlog, which was made worse during COVID, when obviously only emergency surgery was being done primarily. The hospital has been making some progress, and I'm going to ask the Chief Operations Officer and the Director of Medical Services to speak shortly. But I'll start with cataract surgery. There's a backlog. They were able to do over 400 cases in 6 months to deal with the backlog. And then you had a air conditioning problem in the theater, which affected their progress. The air conditioning system was rectified, and then recently now, you have the operating microscope needs to be replaced. So you seem to be going forward, and then you get to stop. Similarly, with joint replacement, they started joint replacement after about 10 or 12 years, was restarted last year, and in 2022, late 2021 last year, they were doing both hip and knee replacement, hip joint replacements. And then they came upon the challenge of the supply chain of getting these prosthetics here into Barbados, and they're now looking for different sources. And I mentioned earlier, we're also concerned, and I said certain gynecological surgeries. They're looking to put 2 theaters into operation in gynecology just to deal with that, because you recognize the issues therein with women who are trying to get their problems dealt with. As you said, something's painful. So we are addressing these matters. In general surgery, there's still a backlog as it relates to hernias, but they're making considerable progress there. But I'll ask the Director of Medical Services and the Chief Operations Officer to speak to this matter. But we are making some progress, but not as swiftly as we would like. And certainly dealing with the gynae surgery, this is a new focus now, where we plan to use 2 theaters, which are dedicated normally to gynecological problems, to get some of the backlog there dealt with.
Excuse me. Anthony Harris, Director of Medical Services. As the Minister said, we are approaching it department by department, and we have quite recently met with the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology to specifically look at the backlog of fibroids surgery required, and we have some strategies in place for that. We were able to gain from that department that the wait time varies anywhere from 3 months to just about 9 months, and we really look at what the strictures were for these, and we have started to put some plans in place to ensure that we can help them to bring those backlogs down. As it relates to the ophthalmic surgery, particularly cataract surgery, unfortunately, after a smooth takeoff for eliminating that backlog, we ran up against some infrastructural problems in the operating theater that needed to be fixed, and also the provision of instruments like an operating microscope. We have put that partially behind us, and we hopefully get back on track with that, so Barbadians can expect a reduction in the wait time in that area. And as in general surgery for the common hernias and stuff like that, we have also been able to persuade an approach that would reduce that backlog. And hernias being a particularly interesting one because it really is a prophylactic operation, meaning that you're trying to avoid the complications, but we have to make sure that we have advised our patients that if there's any problem with their hernia, if it starts to have excessive pain or failure to reduce, that they can present as an emergency. And we have been seeing that and getting those things done as an emergency. So it really is, coming out of COVID, it was a bit of a challenge for the hospital and the office of the DMS, but we have been working towards reduction of the wait list in all departments. Unfortunately, as the minister says, as it relates to joint replacements, what started off and was going along quite merrily, we did have the problem of the supply chain and not being able to have the prosthesis available to deal with this. But I think we have now tried to widen that supply system and have another product in consideration, and we are expecting to be back on track very shortly as well.
Christine Greenwich, Chief Operations Officer. We're about to restart the joint replacements by the end of this month. So we have been in touch with our vendor, and there's a new crop of hips as well as knees. So right now, the Department of Orthopedics will be providing the patients that are best fit at this time to receive these surgeries. The backlog in surgeries overall, there are multi-factors. Some are patient-related in terms of the fitness to undergo surgery. And again, as mentioned previously, this is coming out of COVID where people were not keeping up with outpatient departments. In terms of the fibroids, and we looked just recently at the trending there, and there are a couple of things that we found out. We need to expand, for example, our anesthesia departments to accommodate a couple more late evening hours so that backlog can be reduced. Right now, we're talking 4 months to 9 months in terms of a wait time. And we met with 5 of our OBGYN surgeons last week to try to deep dive into some of their challenges. So we look forward to adding a second OT time for this group. And right now, the patients are, in particular, we're focusing on fibroids, but there are other GYN procedures, but fibroids in general, they are now assessing those patients. Part of the challenge, though, from their end, from the doctor's end, is that we're seeing patients coming in when the fibroids have grown to quite large, and it takes some time in terms of proceeding with the surgical procedures, that you want to make sure that there's no complications such as hemorrhages. But overall, in terms of patient education, this was raised earlier, we are about to do a campaign on the media with some of the symptomologies that women need to be aware of, not only women, but men as well. I had a conversation with a male recently who was talking about his partner every month that are trouble with fibroids. So it's a general public education awareness that we need to highlight knowledge of your body and what is a normal period, and encourage more women to come forth for treatments.
Thank you for that response. There's another very troubling condition that exists within our healthcare system that I am hopeful that what you've shared so far in terms of speeding up the surgeries suggests that perhaps it's being addressed and dealt with. One of the concerns I have is people's ability to access these services via the public health system. And one of the problems that I experience as an MP is where a constituent would say to me that they have a condition that needs surgery or whatever is the case. When they try to go through the public system, it keeps being pushed back, pushed back, pushed back. Yet, a medical doctor could tell them, if you can find $5,000 or $7,000, I can do that for you in 3 weeks. I don't understand that, and neither does the Barbadian public. How is this being addressed, and what is happening now that is helping us to get to a place where surgeries are beginning to happen, and how much of that is actually happening through the public space where people can get it free instead of having to go and find thousands of dollars to pay somebody privately to do the same surgery?
Anthony Harris, Director of Medical Services. It is as distressing to me as it is distressing to you, ma'am. And it is something that we certainly do not encourage. I have, like you, heard the stories that it does occur, and I have no doubt that it has occurred. And but it is something that is not encouraged. We certainly try to make sure that we provide all the support to the departments to make sure that they can have the resources to effectively do these things. But it is something I think that it certainly is not a position that the hospital certainly frowns on it and doesn't treat it. We treat it very seriously, and it is put aside. If such a demand is put on a patient, we would certainly, and we know, we will certainly investigate it and ensure that it is, halt is brought to it.
So you're saying that patients can come to the hospital and report?
Yes. We certainly have a clinical risk department where such a complaint can be lodged, and it will certainly be investigated.
Thank you very much. I hope all Barbados has heard that. My last question, Chair, is the issue of eye care. You started to speak about it. One of the things I've always been very pleased about is the relationship with Cuba and the relationship with the eye care services that they have been able to provide for Barbadians. And I wanted to find out where we were in terms of that collaboration, and if we will be able to look at resuming, or if you have another plan that would allow Barbadians to be able to access their very good eye care services.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. I don't know where I should start. Last time I was in this seat, we had the whole process of the Cuban collaboration, the Operación Milagro, where we had hundreds of persons on a backlog for cataract surgery and pterygia and other things, and we were able to send them to Cuba to have this surgery. Under certain conditions, we had to assess them here thoroughly to ensure that they had no issues, no hypertensive, cardiovascular, diabetic issues, to ensure that everyone that went would come back. It went very well, and it was terminated, I believe, sometime probably around 2009 or thereabout, shortly after the government change. More recently, 2 years ago, we saw a waiting list for cataract surgery rising, and we had meetings, and we were discussing in parallel with the Cubans But the QH did show that they could rise to the occasion, and the doctors and nurses there said they wanted to have an opportunity to deal with it. It was led by the chief operations officer, and they tasked themselves with doing 80 cataracts a month. And they did it for a number of months. They did quite well. So I don't believe that the backlog for cataract surgery is as large as it used to be. The QH has been able, they've made a determination to do it here. So the issue with doing setting the back up with Cuba has been put on hold, pending they're not able to manage that backlog. So it's important that they get the operating microscope and they get all the equipment that is necessary. And I certainly believe that they can do it again. But we have always had the Cubans there as plan B, if necessary, to use.
Let me thank you very much, and let me take this opportunity to say how proud I am of you, how you led us and managed us through COVID. It was a comfort to us as ordinary Barbadians to know that there were other Barbadians out there willing to put their lives on the line and put their health on the line and the health of their family on the line in order to help keep us safe. And I personally am very, very grateful, very grateful.
Thank you.
Honorable member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, the David Thompson Polyclinic was mentioned. I did some tours, and the facility is really in a bad condition. My question to you is there any plan in the next financial year to do some repairs at that location?
I'm going to ask Mr. Haynes to speak to this because I do believe he mentioned it earlier, plans for David Thompson Polyclinic. There's work to be done there.
My second question then is in relation to, at some point in time in the past, it was mention of the David Thompson going 24 hours. Is that still on the cards?
I haven't heard of that since I've assumed responsibility at the ministry. Prior to that, I had heard that there was plans for David Thompson to become a 24-hour polyclinic. I don't think it has ever started as a 24-hour polyclinic. This was something that was discussed, I believe, 3 years ago. At the time, I had cautioned and was well aware that years ago I had tried to move Randall Phillips and Morris Bayer to 10 o'clock, to extended hours. To, I believe one was 10 o'clock and one was 8:30. And I had met tremendous difficulty as it related to, you needed additional nurses, you needed security guards. I mean, as it related to Randall Phillips, it was next to the police station. And I believe the unions at the time said that we would need special security if their staff were going to be allowed to work there. That has evaporated over time and has this not happened. There were plans for David Thompson. I asked the CMO to speak to it. I believe back then provision was made for some staff. I'm never sure if the staff was, the agreement, if the posts were ever created. And it was felt, from what I can see, especially during COVID, that it was something that was not abandoned, but was not implemented. It is, I support the idea because I was all for one, for having a state-of-the-art clinic in St. John. It goes back to the previous honorable member who made a reference to Cuba. I had made a visit to Cuba with a delegation to look at, before we sent patients to Cuba for for treatment, to look at Cuba and their health system, because people were concerned that you were sending people to Cuba, and there were all sorts of questions raised. Toured Cuba, looked at the health system, and was very impressed by their polyclinic system, where polyclinics were outfitted. And Cuba is much larger than Barbados, of course, but they were in a situation, this was in 2005, where in Cuban polyclinics, they could stabilize a stroke, they could stabilize a person with a heart attack and transfer them to a regional center. So these were the things they were doing in polyclinics. You had asthmatic bays and stuff like this. And I remember speaking to Prime Minister Arthur at the time. Now, we were looking at the St. John Polyclinic, which had been left abandoned since 1990, had been left abandoned, I believe since 1991. We hear about the BLP abandoning the polyclinic, but the construction ceased in 1991. And I told them that this was the opportunity for us to have a clinic, a showpiece, that would have facilities to treat patients, would have a few beds, would have an ambulance bay, and all these things. And those were the plans that we had for the David Thompson Polyclinic. As fate would have it, we had gone to PPC. It was supposed to be a project for a two-year project to be funded and built over 2 years. As fate would have it, we lost the election, and the David Thompson Polyclinic took a different direction. Rather than focusing on patient care, I believe we went into almost like a pseudo community, something where you had rooms for seeing doctors and patients to be dressed, but then you mixed it, you co-mingled it with lotto booths or vendors and all sorts. So it became all sorts of things, but not what was supposed to be the ideal. But, Honorable Minister, I promise you that I'll do my best, not necessarily this year, but with the expansion that I speak about, to bring the David Thompson Polyclinic up to that level as the polyclinic serving the eastern part of the island. And it is ideally located for people in certain parts of St. George, St. Joseph, and St. Philip. So it is something that we will address, but I'm not going to promise you that it will be done in this financial year.
I think, Honorable Minister, what you're omitting is that the rush to get the polyclinic up and running, a lot of inferior material was used at the location. Hence the reason now why it is infested with termites. Yesterday, the Honorable Member for...
Before you go on, because you're mentioning some current things and they're being addressed, and perhaps Mr. Haynes should speak to them now before the message goes abroad that we still have these termites and all of these things.
Chairman, Greg Haynes, Senior Technical Officer, Technical Management Services. Responding to the Honorable Member, we realized that David Thompson had a lot of work, a lot of inferior work, from termites, failing chiller system, pumps that crash. We have windows with skylights with water seeking in. It is a mess up there. The ministry decided, as I said, with a list of goals to target David Thompson. And as we speak, some work is ongoing there. The termite treatment is about 90% complete. In tandem, the guys are rebuilding the cabinets that were affected by the termites. The pump systems, we have the necessary costing, and we'll replace those, because currently we are operating on a warm pump system, where it should be 3. Actually, this week, the lighting in the car park to the western side was completed, because we realized the lights, it need adequate lighting as well. So yes, to your question, some work is being done, undertaken at David Thompson Polyclinic, and we will proceed to complete our work.
Thank you. I'm sure the MP for that area will be happy to hear that. Minister, my second question, as I was mentioning just now, yesterday the Honorable Member for St. James North mentioned the issues that our national athletes are having in terms of being dismissed as a result of being overseas representing the country. My question to you, is it possible at all that your ministry and mine can work together to provide athletes who were selected on the national team with a free medical checkup, exam, whatever, examination, whatever you call it. Because the truth is that a lot of our athletes are not paid on the national team, and I see this as a means of providing an incentive or assisting athletes who were selected for the national team. So is it possible that we can have a structured program where our national athletes can have that free health check coming out of your ministry?
Honourable member, I don't know that this is a difficult request. Have you made any overtures to your ministry, to the PS of Health or the CMO? This seems like something fairly straightforward.
So I guess that is a yes. We will do it.
Yes, but it was a question too. Have you made any overtures, any requests? Well, I said it was a yes, but has your ministry made any overtures to the Ministry of Health and Wellness to get this done? It seems really straightforward. I know that I've heard that the forms that you require are quite long, but I mean, I believe this is something that can be arranged quite easily.
Making that overture, no, sir.
The PS and the CM are both here.
Thank you. That is it from me, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member for St. John. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of Committees. Ministers, I beg your pardon. I understand that there has been some new thrust towards inviting private hospital investment from overseas. If this is correct, and it has been ventilated in the media, if it is correct, how do you see this impacting on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital? Would it, if these hospitals attract those with money, and if these hospitals attract the medical personnel for whom service there may be more attractive, do you see this compromising what the QEH may be able to offer in future? So I've said all of that to ask, how do you see the private hospital thrust impacting on the service that the QEH may be capable of giving?
I don't know if I can agree with you that there's a thrust. I believe what I know of it, and it certainly doesn't come to the Ministry of Health, as you would appreciate. This is a matter of investment in economic affairs. But you do get, from what I've seen, persons, various entities, from time to time, expressing an interest in coming to Barbados to establish health institutions. And these vary from hospitals to dermatology clinics to dental schools, to dental hospitals. And it can have, in terms of the direction, these entities and this is an investment, and they're often looking to make money, and by and large, usually private. And they are focusing primarily on health tourism, people coming to Barbados to be treated, to recuperate, to be rehabilitated. Of course, there are often opportunities for Barbadian doctors who have certain skills, who there's nothing that stops a doctor from working at two different entities. I believe it happens even now in the QEH. A number of consultants have other practices. Some are practicing in the QEH, practice in surgery, and also practice in surgery at the other private hospital. And then there's some other private clinics that have been locally owned clinics that have sprung up in Belleville and the surrounding areas. At the end of the day, it can bring investment to the country. It can provide additional services, because for instance, where, for argument's sake, if you had an entity that was coming to Barbados in a couple of weeks, I'm just putting it there, and could offer a service, for example, we speaking about linear accelerators this morning. You could have found yourself in a situation, I'm not saying it's going to happen now, where you had a private entity establishing in Barbados, and having a linear accelerator, and the country could certainly save funds by entering an arrangement with that entity to have provision of radiation oncology services at that entity in Barbados, and more than likely at a cost much less than sending persons abroad, and certainly having the escorts or the people who need the relatives close to them. So it can be a plus in bringing services to Barbados that are not currently here, and the government would obviously arrange a relationship with that entity to provide these services, and as part of the negotiating process, you could do that. It provides an opportunity for doctors to get different skills and more, and certainly get experience in different areas. It would always be a competition for nurses, because of course it would then encourage us, it would be, to obviously increase our training of nurses with the understanding that we have private entities coming here that will need our services, as opposed to as happens in other countries, where when private hospitals set up, they're bringing a lot of people out to demand different positions. And even in some other countries in the Caribbean, they're bringing people as cooks and maids and janitors, and all of these people coming. So I don't know that it will compete with what we plan to do to the QEH. The QEH is our main tertiary institution. It is a stellar institution. It's where Barbadians go to, especially to provide care, to have free access to free healthcare, state of the art. And I can't see that it would have necessarily a deleterious effect on our health system and in terms of the provision of healthcare. And it gives greater opportunities for our people. And of course, Mr. Chairman, through you, for the honorable member, for people of his stature who might want to get first world medical care in Barbados.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Minister, there is the view in Barbados that the QEH, I'm going to be careful about how I term this, that the QEH has done better. There are those who will say it like that it has done better, and you would probably admit that it can do better, and you will probably admit that you intend to do better by the QEH. In fact, in your last answer, you said about, you used the statement, what we plan to do. One takes it that that is an acceptance that the QEH is not performing optimally. Let me put it like that. And I think you're following me. And in the hope to do better, and with the admission that it is not performing well presently, I think you will admit that. When would you say to Barbadians that with the plans that you have, that the QEH will be performing optimally this year, next year, in 2 years, 3 years? When do you hope to offer Barbadians the best of the QEH which it has been before, and it is definitely not now. According to your plans, when do you expect or when do you promise Barbadians that the QEH will return to its best days?
Thank you, Honorable Member. If I was in another place, I would have believed that you were listening to a conversation that I had with your brother. Recent conversation.
I have 7 brothers.
With the one that is a consultant at the QEH.
I
We
don't
had a
think he
similar
wants that
conversation.
disclosed.
I'm wondering if he shared notes of the discussion.
No, I did not speak to anyone who is engaged at the QH before I came here.
A coincidence. But it is the exact conversation we had to set the record straight.
With him?
To set the record straight. When I have accepted, have said publicly, and I think as recently as Monday in the other house, I spoke about the conditions at the QEH. And in no uncertain terms, I said that they were not what we were accustomed to be. And that the QEH has had better days and can do better.
So you're not
again.
happy?
Of course not.
Good.
That's the second question. Mr. Chairman, I need to be guided. I don't understand what is the question these days, but
No,
I
I
will
was
try
seeking
to figure it
clarification.
out.
No, I
You
wanted
know.
you to speak clearly for the record.
Oh,
I
yes.
wanted you to tell
The
Barbados
hospital
that
has...
you're
has-
unhappy with the situation.
I
at the
am.
QEH.
I am unhappy. I'm not
Good,
at all
good.
pleased with the situation. And that is why we have been saying, and you've heard the members of staff speaking, that we are working assiduously to improve conditions. The QH has had better days, admittedly, in those days that we know we talk of better days, and that is in the context of myself and Mr. Tony Harris and your brother. There's been a lot of technological advances. So we would have had better days, but there's still better days that we never had. And our aim is to get back to our base and try to now catch up, so to speak, with the technological advances that have come about over the decades. And that is why it was so unfortunate that during the 10 years when your party held office, and you are a member, that there seemed to be benign neglect of the QEH. Benign neglect, not malignant. It wasn't deliberate, for whatever reason. So that when I could speak about wanting to acquire a linear accelerator in 2007, and in 2024, still looking to do so. You understand what I'm talking about. And I've also made the point from time to time that healthcare should not be a political matter. That you shouldn't try to score cheap political points on matters as important and sensitive as healthcare. I expect healthcare to be a continuum, so that if I left mammograms being done at the QEH, I expect it to come back now in 2022, 24, and find mammograms being done, find using needle and wire localization, stereotactic localization of breast lumps. You expected these things to move forward. If I left in 2008 and there was no linear accelerator, you expect progression. So we should not be now looking at linear accelerators. We should be thinking ahead, cyclotron and these things. So, yes, I am not satisfied. I will do my utmost best. You, in this morning in your introduction, you spoke of a duumvirate. But
No, you're very proud of that.
even duumvirates have a lifespan.
Have a lifespan.
They do have a lifespan. And I certainly will give you the assurance in Barbados that I will do as best as I can to improve healthcare, not only at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but also in the primary healthcare setting, which I think is where we should be focused, where our energy should be focused at this point in time. I will do my best while I am here and whilst I'm given the chance to do so. That is my assurance. I am not a gambler. I'm not into speculating in years. I don't know what will happen in 6 months in this country. So as to telling Barbadians when this will change. That would just be theatrics. And I am not known for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is very impressive to say that you don't believe that health management or health should be a political issue. And you're saying this in the presence of a quite large and impressive team around you. And you are a politician. And perhaps if you feel that way, a politician should probably remove himself from the apex of health if it is not to be politicized. Why put a politician at the head of it? So that your view may contradict the office that you hold. You hold that office, admittedly now within the last 30 seconds as a member of a duumvirate, very proudly stated just now by you. I don't know how you can take that solemn position about health not being subject to political leadership and yet hold the office as a politician. But I will move on to your other capacity, not only as a member of the duumvirate, but as a...
I want to answer your question even though you haven't
You want
posed
to ask me a question?
Answer your question.
No, that's a comment.
I can comment on your comment. I
Only
never
if-
said...
only if- only if- Mr. Chairman
no.
allows.
I said I don't believe that healthcare should be treated in the realm, it should be a political object, simply to whether it's politicized.
Yes, and you are a politician.
And you are, well, you know exactly what I mean. You know,
I
everybody here knows what I mean.
Can't speak for anybody else. You are a politician heading something that you don't think should be subject to political consideration.
No, I accept that healthcare and its deficiencies will be criticized.
Yes.
But not for the sake, not to say, for example, as your leader has said, that a piece of equipment for treating cancer has been broken over a year, when we never had the equipment. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I didn't mean to raise my voice. No, not it's the mic, I believe.
No, you're entitled to get angry.
I don't think you've ever seen me angry. But you're free to criticize, but you know exactly what I mean. It should not be in the criticize, but don't create deliberate fantasies and untruths to score political points. Thank you.
All right, let me press on. I don't want to engage in that regard. I wanted to take you to your capacity as a senior minister. In fact, if I look around this parliament now, you are the most senior minister in here. And that counts for something. In fact, even among the senior ministers, you are the most senior. And that is why I described you as the other person in that duumvirate of power. And you therefore come to this office, you come to this parliament with a wealth of knowledge as to the goings-on in government. I want to know if you're willing to speak as to government expenditures in relation to travel, in relation to the unprecedented large number of consultants. This government has employed many, many, many consultants. This government has engaged in extravagant travel, and you have not suffered for that. You have been on planes fairly often, and that's not a criticism. I know you're doing the people's business. It is the yield that we look forward to see at some point. But as a senior minister and as someone coming to this office bearing collective responsibility, you will not now want to deny to the people of Barbados that you are familiar with government's very large bill in relation to travel and in relation to the hiring of consultants, even in the public service, where heads of department who work their way through the system now have to sacrifice their ambitions to lead departments for persons who come in at the top contractually. Now, that is something that this government has thought to introduce into public service in Barbados, frustrating those who work their way through the system, work well, except that their ambitions are now blunted by contractual service implanted at the top of those departments. But the main question is this: as a very senior minister and the most senior minister outside of the Prime Minister, I ask you whether you are willing to comment on government's very large wages bill for the employment of consultants, whether you defend it, and whether you are willing to defend government's extremely large bill in relation to travel. You may not wish, for your own purposes, perhaps, to disclose that amount within the last financial year. You may not wish to do that. It may alarm several Barbadians. But having that seniority and having that collective knowledge as to the goings-on in a cabinet that must disclose to Barbadians how it is spending the money, would you like to confirm the very large bill? And would you like to comment as to that very large bill that government has in relation to consultants and in relation to travel? As a senior minister, the most senior minister.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, this question, in my judgment, has nothing to do with the Ministry of Health, which the Honorable Member, the Honorable Minister leads. It has absolutely nothing. If you want me to treat it as a question, I will instruct the Honorable Minister that he doesn't have to answer, but I will add it to your. I would add it to your sequence of questions, so then you just have one.
Yes. So you've elected then to protect the minister.
To protect? No, I'm carrying out the rules of the House.
Or the rules of the House.
Yes.
You see, the difficulty that this exercise places on us is that I don't know why they brought this minister to expose him to public scrutiny, but you wonder if the exercise should not expose certain other ministries.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
There may be a little. I beg your pardon, sir.
You have stated on several occasions in this House that you want to speak to the people and the people must know, etc. And now you are questioning which minister comes into the well to speak to the people in a very important ministry in this country, Honorable Member. Proceed, ask your question, or an appropriate question.
Yes. So I just want to be clear that you're ruling that this senior minister may not ask any question outside, beyond the narrow confines of health.
That is where he's in the. That is where health is the head being discussed at this time.
Yes, well, perhaps.
And health is a wide and varied head which you can have many questions on. Perhaps, Honorable Member, have you run out of questions?
No, I haven't run out of questions. You now have another intervention from the person who falls outside of the duopoly.
Honorable Member, I don't hear asides. Honorable Member, proceed. Utilize your time wisely.
But the Honorable Member was speaking directly at me across you, so you must have heard.
Honorable Member, I don't hear asides. I want to give you every opportunity.
You see, whenever the word duopoly is mentioned, that member gets very anxious.
Speak to Barbadians.
I'm not getting in between them.
I'm giving you the opportunity to speak to Barbadians and ask them the questions that you determine based on your interventions on occasions that Barbadians need to hear. What they also need to hear is to hear you, as you are now, place yourself as the champion of Barbadians.
No,
That's
no,
what you need to ask the appropriate questions, because as the leader of the opposition, you are a future leader of Barbados, and they want to hear you. You have the opportunity to speak to the people.
You see, Your Honor, I took it that when this minister came here, he came here with dual capacity. If you don't mind me finishing,
Leader of the
Your Honor.
opposition, no, he did not come
I see.
here with dual
I
capacity.
thought-
He came here
I thought-
as senior minister
Yes,
responsible for
yes.
health and wellness. That is his portfolio. That is why he is here with his team, because if he was here for any other purpose, he would have different people here.
Yes.
He is here in Parliament as the honorable minister responsible for health and wellness.
Yes.
And he has come to this chamber to speak to Barbadians and to educate all of us, including you, honorable leader of the opposition,
Yes.
on health matters in this country. So please proceed
Yes.
with your questions along those lines.
I am obliged to you, sir. Just to make the further clarification, without expending too much time, that there has to be some good reason why this minister was called a senior minister. Sir, surely you must understand the new administration of things in Barbados. Not only is he a minister of health and wellness, but he has a separate title called senior minister. And that senior minister, not only is he paid more than the juniors next, like the one, the honorable member for St. Michael North who's next to him, not only is he paid more than him, but he enjoys greater stature, he enjoys greater responsibility, and that's why he's called a senior minister. He comes with greater knowledge, and I was just hoping, and he wants to, I was just hoping to elevate him beyond the narrow confines of health and to let him educate you as to his deeper knowledge as to the running of this government and the monies that are spent. But if we don't wish to hear him on matters of travel and consultancies, perhaps I could restrict him to the number of consultants that he has in his ministry. And if he thinks that they're frustrating persons who are appointed within the system, I could ask him that, but I'm not going to waste his time by asking him that. I think the people were more concerned. You see, he is the last minister with us. And we wanted, yes, he is the last minister with us. They haven't brought transport and works. They haven't brought housing. There's another one they didn't bring that people were looking forward to hear. When I first came here, I was told, 3 weeks ago, I was told that the AG's office was coming as well, so that the people of Barbados have been deprived. And now we have a senior minister. That is why we wanted to take advantage, not of him, but of his presence, carrying the knowledge that he carries. But if that is if that is your ruling, sir, we will abide by it and press on.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I may, on a point of order, and also on, I think, a point of clarification for those who are listening, because I really don't feel comfortable that the honourable leader of the opposition is seeking to mislead the public who may not be familiar with the rules of this House and certainly with the rules of debate as it relates to the estimate. He would do well to familiarize himself with them, particularly as it relates to how the heads are chosen, because on all other occasions, and he should be aware of this if he was in the estimates for the last 5 years, that the government would normally choose the heads and indicate to the leader of the opposition, at the time it would have been the person who would have preceded you, as to the heads that were likely to come. Mm-hmm. The leader of the opposition would prepare as is expected for those specific heads. And we have, in many cases, extended the number of hours on each occasion over the course of the last few weeks. Mm-hmm. We have also, in particular in this debate, recognized that we're over the 40 hours, and we have indicated to you up to this morning that the intention was to continue discussion on this head even as far as Friday. So I really take umbrage at the insinuation that we're trying to stop certain heads from coming, when on previous occasions, these heads have actually been properly ventilated in previous sessions of Parliament. There's no attempt to stop any particular head from being discussed or debated in this chamber. But on each year, we choose different heads. Sometimes the same heads come, sometimes they don't. But we choose them because obviously we are advancing different aspects of government's program. And I'm sure that in the course of the budget debate as well, you will hear from other ministers as well the full extent of their ministries and the things that government is doing. So I think it is a bit unfair and it is unfortunate that we're going down this line. The Honourable Minister is not here to answer questions relating, unless it relates to consultancies in his ministry. He's not here to answer those wider questions. I think what you should do as a practicing attorney is select the way in which you want to put over your point. But to use this chamber and certainly these estimates on health, as we are discussing something so serious, to make another headline, as you've done already on this issue of the flow of the estimates, is really unfortunate. And I think you would do well to really just pose the questions to the Honourable Minister and his team that are affecting the people of this country, because there's no divide between us as it relates to the concerns of health. As the Honourable Minister says, he has concerns as well. We all do. And we are certainly working to try to resolve those issues. And it would do, I think, the entire country well, Honourable Minister, Honourable Leader, if you focus on what the issues are at hand so that we can all see improvements, particularly for the most vulnerable of this country.
And of course, I would want to express indebtedness to the last speaker for giving me notice 24 hours in advance as to which ministry would be coming to do a presentation. I do want to express that indebtedness.
You have had, Mr. Chairman, again, I am trying my best to contain myself because I am in a very special place, and therefore I can only say that the Honourable Member continues to mislead. I'm sure he can ask even the former Leader of the Opposition. I am extremely courteous, despite how he has been discourteous to this administration. I have been courteous in letting him know on every occasion what we are doing. It is difficult to say what time we're going to finish and which day we are going to doing to precision because things change. And he has been aware of the heads. He has also been aware of the days at which we are meeting. If he is not here in the afternoon to know that we are starting the next day, the Honourable Member might do well to liaise with the Clerk of Parliament. But we are clear in terms, and certainly I am clear in terms of giving him adequate notice of the matters that we will be discussing during the course of the estimates. He may not be familiar with the fact of how long the estimates last, as he is not familiar with the rules, but that is a matter that he will have to work out for himself. But I am clear, Mr. Chairman, that I have discharged my obligation to this House and to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in letting him know what we are doing in the course of these debates.
I have chosen to ignore the not infrequent accusation of lack of familiarity with the rules. I don't think that is worthy of response. All the rules are written in English as far as I have read them, except that I will repeat my indebtedness for being told 24 hours in advance as to what ministry would come next. If you wish to hear this, Your Honor, and to say that there are heads, there are ministries that I was told when this process began that have disappeared. I was told that certain other ministries would be here, and they have disappeared. They've fallen out of sight. And I want to reflect what the public has been asking. The public has been asking what happened to certain ministries. Why can't these ministries be brought into this place to give account? And certainly the Ministry of Transport and Works has been one. The Ministry of Housing has been one. If the government has seen it fit not to bring these ministries, so be it. I will not complain, but there has been complaint within the public domain. The government may have some good reason as to why those ministries were not going to be subject to scrutiny of the public. But, Your Honor, if we pursue this further, we will just be going back and forth and saying the same thing. I have no intention of saying the same thing over and over. I just lament the absence of certain ministries. I also was told that the Ministry of the Attorney General would be here. And that ministry has disappeared as well. We kept sports in here, and I don't disrespect sports, but I think sports spent a long time. Sports may have spent 3 days in here. And Ministry of Transport and Works not one day. And at the rate at which we're going, health may finish this evening, because I don't see a lot of interest, surprisingly, among the few of us who are here now. I don't see a lot of interest. I wonder if they will bring somebody else on Friday. But, Your Honor, you are probably in a state now of bafflement. You don't know where the discussion has gone. May I return to my questions?
No, Mr. Chair, again, I seek to clarify, because the one thing I keep saying is the only thing I will leave public life with is my reputation, and I will not allow my reputation as leader of government business to be tainted by the leader of the opposition. At no point as leader of government business have I indicated to the honourable member that we were doing the head of office of the Attorney General. I do not know from whence that information came, but I will repeat that as a matter of courtesy, I communicate with the honourable member. He actually answers me no more than he did when he was on this side of the floor, and I'm grateful for that. But perhaps if he would read his messages, he would see that this leader of government business is very clear in what we are doing and providing him with the information that he needs to do his job. So, sir, I really do feel that we have exhausted this issue, and I do agree that we should now move on. If the honourable member wants to raise questions on specific things of consultants or other things in the ministry to the honourable minister, then let us get to that question and let the honourable minister answer that. But anything else, sir, I think we really need to move on at this point.
Your Honor, I have accepted your ruling as to the parameters within which this minister will go. And I would want to now express some regret that I referred to this minister as being a member of a duumvirate. I think that is at the heart of the honourable member's irascibility today. I want to apologize to her for not placing her within the duumvirate of power that rules Barbados. That is where we are. Let us agree to that. Let me apologize for not having placed you within a triumvirate of power which does not exist. It is a duumvirate. This minister is the other member of that duumvirate.
Mr. Chairman, the honourable member is beginning to sound like the former Prime Minister of this country, and I'm sure those words are certainly confusing a lot of the electorate, but let him carry on.
The electorate are very intelligent. They know that a duumvirate of power is two persons who wield power exclusively among themselves, and this minister is one. We all know that. Don't be upset.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, would you please proceed with your question? If you do not have, let me move on to the other persons who are here and would like to make a contribution.
Yes, Your Honor. Minister, I want to ask a question. I know you know the answer. The percentages may be difficult for you. You do have people who seek medical attention overseas as opposed to at the QEH. Look, this is a difficult question, but I think you know, Minister, what I'm getting at here. Are you satisfied that the numbers of people seeking medical attention overseas are doing so because they don't wish to have a relationship with the QEH? Or is it simply their perception that what is offered overseas is better than what is offered here? What is your perception?
That depends on the individual.
Yes.
It depends on the circumstances. It depends on the person who they're seeing. People don't get up and decide that they're going overseas. They're usually referred. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, surgeons and consultants here refer people overseas for care and attention that is not readily available here. I mean, we spoke about medical aid this morning as it pertains to cancer treatment. But the majority of the expenditure on medical aid is usually to send patients abroad to have procedures done that are not available in Barbados, which can be done much more easily and I'll explain this one, in other countries. For example, in a small country, small population like Barbados, you might want a specific type of operation needed for a purpose, and you might see 1 or 2 cases a year in Barbados. you would have to, if you're seeing a patient who needs this procedure, you might advise that patient that they might be better off at a center that does probably those same two procedures in a day and probably and every week and every day in the week, as opposed to doing it here where it's usually only seen or done once or twice per year. I have no doubt that there are other people who seek certain expertise that their advice is not available here. But as back to the point, government spends a lot of money on sending people abroad for treatment and different procedures that are not readily available here. I can't tell you the percentage. It will vary.
Yes. Okay, that's fair.
From year to year in terms of
yes,
what is wrong with them and what has to be done.
Thank you. And my final question, Your Honor. And Minister, please don't construe that I am asking questions based on any internal information received. That is absolutely not the case.
That is a question?
No. No, that's the lead up to the question. And there are those who believe that, as you and I agreed earlier, that things at the QEH may be so perilous that...
Stop you. I've never said that things at the QEH were perilous, Mr. Chairman. I haven't used the word perilous in here for the day.
Yes. I apologize to you. No, that's my word. I say that we were agreeing on my word, not that you used the word perilous.
You and I don't agree on anything.
Right. Well, we could probably use a word that is milder. That you and I agree that things have been better. And you boasted that when you were there in a different capacity, that, yes, you said to this chamber that when you were there...
I haven't boasted of anything. Your interpretation of anything I said is entirely yours.
Yes, well, I took it to be a boast. That you were saying when you were a doctor, and you called some illustrious names. You called Dr. Harris's name, for example.
And I'm calling your brothers now.
No, let's deal with Dr. Harris. That there was a cadre of quite illustrious medical personnel there, doctors there. And you have agreed with us that it is not what it used to be. You withdraw from the use of the word perilous. But, Minister, there are those who are concerned that the situation at the QEH may be perilous. That's what I'm saying to you now, that it may be perilous, and that unless you do something fairly urgently, we could lose the quality of health care that we have. And this is not political, Minister. This is absolutely not political. This is a statement rooted in deep concern for the health of the people of this country. And there are those who believe that unless something is done and urgently done, that that peril could turn to collapse of our health system. What assurances, and that is coming from me based on information, not from any professional in the hospital. What assurance can you, using this public opportunity, what assurance can you give to Barbadians who may feel, those who go to A&E, for example, a place overrun with people who have the traumatic injuries like gunshots and so on, can you give Barbadians the assurance that the situation of peril, if a person is sitting in a department for 3 days, that is perilous? Can you and are you able to give an assurance to Barbadians that the situation at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is not perilous? And I want to add another example. There are people living in Bridgetown who are subject to the fumes from an incinerator. That is not political. That is not dramatic. That is a fact of life. And Minister, I know you are committed to good health care in this country. What assurances will you and can you give at this point in time as to the drastic improvement that is needed at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital if it is to deliver health care efficiently?
Thank you, Honorable Member. I believe you've asked 2 questions. Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, the answer to the first one is easy. The QH is not in a perilous state.
I'm relieved to hear that.
It is not. Every day, a lot of very good work is done at that institution. Doctors, nurses work tirelessly, and I'm going to be blunt, save a lot of the lives of several of hundreds of patients. This is done daily. This is a fact. There's no denying this. The conditions in A&E, and I spoke about this earlier, the waiting times as they are now, they're unacceptable, and they will be improved. There are a number, I mentioned some of them earlier as it relates to A&E specifically, measures that will be taken to deal with those waiting times.
Did you say when? You said they will be improved, but are you giving the public some assurance as to when?
The process has started. First of all, we are doing the expansion, which will shortly be completed.
Yes.
I believe it's expected to be completed by the end of this month, pending some, the usual checks and things.
You see, that's what the
There's
public wants to know. The public wants to know when.
There is equipment being ordered, that's been ordered. I mentioned the fact that we will have a CAT scan there. That will again reduce further the waiting time. Oftentimes persons who need CAT scans go to A&E and then they have to wait to get an orderly to take them to the main X-ray department, then back. And all of this will reduce that waiting time. Because we are enduring this in A&E at this point in time, I can't imagine, because of a situation in A&E, a hospital that withstood COVID when everything was put under pressure. It didn't collapse then. It's certainly not at the point of collapsing now, being perilous.
Don't get angry.
We saw health institutions.
Don't get angry.
I'm just pointing at you for emphasis. Sir.
Oh, I see.
Because I noticed that you use the courtroom mannerisms quite a lot. So I'm using the surgical mannerisms.
Oh, I see.
That it will collapse. I mean, that is far-fetched. That is political diatribe. When you say that publicly that our hospital is in a perilous state. It is not. It is not. Yes, we've had times, as I said, when extraordinary orthopedic surgeons, like your brother, were working there and still work there. But they're still there. But now you have persons who've been sent abroad by the QH to specialize and train in other areas. We thought of hepatobiliary surgery and having surgery. There were times when we sent those people overseas for surgery. In the now, in Barbados. Vascular surgery. We used to talk about having all these amputations. We have vascular surgeons working in the QH now. We're about to embark again on transplant surgery. This is not an institution that is perilously close to collapsing. Next question. You spoke about the people of the city.
Yes, who are ingesting the fumes.
Who are ingesting these fumes. The present incinerator facility is inadequate. It's unacceptable. But it didn't happen yesterday, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, you said you're not happy about, you see, you're not talking into the mic, so I'm not hearing some of the things you were saying. You were saying you were very unhappy about something.
I said I am unhappy.
Happy?
Unhappy.
Unhappy. Yes.
About the situation with the incinerator.
Yes.
Having said that, this didn't happen 2 weeks ago. It didn't happen 2 years ago. This
You see,
situation.
the public is concerned that, the
No,
people
no,
in the
no,
city
no.
are concerned that it's
But you
happening now.
asked your question and I'm answering it.
Yes, please.
That the incinerator is about 33 years old, about that. And it's past, it needed to, it's been repaired several times. Indeed, it was up about 3 weeks ago and everybody was very happy in the surrounding areas. It was burning and no one knew. And then it started to malfunction again. But to cut a long story short, the QEH is currently securing the services of, through UNOPS, I can say here, of a consultancy to look at the situation.
Another consultant?
UNOPS.
Another consultant to do
A
what?
UN
Sorry?
agency. Because we have secured funding, and I mentioned that in here sometime last year.
Yes, it was on the radio.
The EIB loan to do that. We recognize that, as I said, it was 30 years ago. Incineration is not necessarily the best solution. In this day and age, where we're concerned about the environment and all these things. They're going to they started gathering information to assess our situation.
Yes.
To deal with the sorting of, looking at a medical waste solution. Dealing with the sorting, the storage, and the technology that will be used to deal with the medical waste.
Yes, they want to hear when the problem will be alleviated. The people in town who are breathing the fumes in, I know you're getting to that. Could you tell them when?
They want to know?
When they will cease to breathe in the fumes from
the incinerator?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I believe the project is expected.
If it is tomorrow, they'll be happy.
It is not tomorrow.
I see. Just give them an idea.
I've given the representative of those people an idea already.
Yeah, but the public would
He's
like
spoken to them.
hear.
I don't know that the people in Christchurch South are affected by it. And those are the ones that I expect you to be speaking to. Huh? I'm going to ask the hospital, the director of engineering of the
Yes, yeah, maybe he can bail you out.
It's a she, incidentally.
Oh,
You
she.
sure you're
I see.
So I'm going to ask the director of engineering to speak to you.
Yes, yes, I will.
I can assure you it will be completed before you become the Prime Minister.
You do like the word duoperate, do you? You don't, okay.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Paula Agbu, Director Engineering Services, Queen Elizabeth Hospital. With respect to the question that you asked, the incinerator, as you heard the senior minister indicate, is quite aged and it is past its life expectancy. We have been able, as a department, to keep the incinerator running for this length of time, and it is the equipment that has been used all through the COVID period to burn all of the COVID waste island-wide. We have had several interventions where we have extended the life of the equipment, and we have been at the stage where we have made many changes and adaptations to have the incinerator work and function to continue the burning of the hazardous and infectious waste for the country. At this stage, we recognize that there needs to be a change, and we are examining change in technology. And in order to meet the criteria of the European Investment Bank, we are trying to follow their procedural framework and guidelines. As a result, we have been working with them to engage UNOPS to look at what is the best solution for us as a country going forward now. There may need to be different technologies, and we are also looking at how best to incorporate the whole waste management solution and not just the burning or the processing of the waste itself, but from the stage of the collection and sorting of the waste right down to the storage of that waste. As it stands right now, we burn every day of the week, and with newer technologies and with more efficient technologies, we would be able to reduce that daily burning or daily processing of the waste, and we would also be able to incorporate some storage for the waste so that we would be able to incorporate a proper maintenance program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I do have a policy. I don't engage directly with the public servants. I think the minister should be the voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too.
Honorable Member for Christchurch, West Central.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thanks to the Minister and his entire team. I can say unreservedly that and give the public the rest assurance that the health of this country is in good hands. And it may have a literal sense if we appreciate the vocation of the Minister who is sitting in the seat now as the Minister responsible for health. And I want to thank him and his team for the excellent job they have been doing thus far. My question relates to something that is personal, and especially for those who exist in the epicenter of Christchurch. I want to talk about community nursing. Very important to me. I appreciate full well the role of those community practitioners in terms of dispensing medicines, administering medicines to persons, changing of dressings, certain diagnoses, and ensuring that persons' wounds are taken care of. They have a vital function in the whole area of community health. I want from you, Minister, and obviously your team, to tell us what is happening to ensure that that becomes an active part of the ministry, and certainly to ensure that it becomes part of the prescription for the overall health and wellness of this country. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Community nursing is vitally important. It is something that I've been stressing since I arrived back at the Ministry of Health and Wellness. It is, I keep saying, and I believe the members of staff are tired of hearing me speaking about community nursing and where I think we were and where I think we are. I'm not going to repeat that here. But I'm glad to see that there is a push in that direction again. The mobile clinic that I spoke about earlier is now part of that. And I'm going to ask the Chief Nursing Officer to speak about the movement towards increased community nursing across Barbados and the importance of it. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Honorable Member, as it relates to public health nursing, we have recognized that there is a need to increase the presence of community nursing throughout Barbados. It is a specialty that requires ongoing training, and unfortunately, we have not had the training that is necessary to supplement those nurses that we need to be out in the community. However, we have a strategic plan going forward as it relates to workforce development, and execution of that plan is a major part of refocusing the ministry's perspective as it relates to the primary health care. That is a major focus for us in the ministry, and as you can appreciate, going in that direction gives us an advantage where we keep Barbadians healthy and where we keep the focus on the critical areas as it relates to determinants of health health, specifically NCDs. And this is an area where our public health nurses are going to play a major role going forward. You would have heard the minister speak to the collaboration between the ministry and the Chamberlain University, where we're looking to train our nurses to become nurse practitioners, where they have a wider scope of practice and able to deliver services, giving diagnoses, prescribing, and so on. So we are going in that direction to increase the visual, the nurses in the community, and making sure that we're able to deal with those matters to improve the quality of life of those at the community level and engage the community, because as you know, nurses are the linchpin of healthcare, and we really are going to be pushing primary healthcare and public health nursing in that direction.
Thank you. I can't reiterate more. And I'm speaking for those in the vulnerable category, especially our children and the elderly and disabled who can't get, maybe because of mobility or whatever, to primary or secondary healthcare facilities, and that's why we want to talk about the importance. So I want to thank you for having a reimagination of those persons in the communities in terms of community nursing. My second question, Minister, relates to an issue that dates back to probably 2005 or so. This is the issue of Cuban doctors, and their ability to be registered and to be part of the whole healthcare network. I know that there are, over the years, we will look at different qualifications, different internship requirements. And I know your ministry would, up until recently, set about a pathway so that we can have those persons become part in a seamless way to be able to deliver to this country after that training, to be delivered to the hospital and other settings, the medical care that is needed. What is your ministry doing to ensure that these Cuban doctors who go and study for sometimes 5-6 years or more are able to transition into our medical scheme, similar to doctors that are trained at UE and other places that are recognized by the Barbados Medical Association? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Member. You kept saying Cuban doctors, but I think you meant Cuban-trained Barbadian doctors. And this is a troublesome matter that is, as you're right, you're correct, goes back to 2005. We have found a pathway. The problem with these Cuban-trained doctors is registration to practice medicine in Barbados. It is not automatic. Within the region, we have the Caribbean accreditation of medical schools that currently would allow you to practice in the Barbados or the region once you complete it. As it relates to Cuba, there's always been a difficulty because Cuba has never really gotten involved and allowed its schools to be assessed and thereby can be accredited to the medical. So for those schools that are not accredited in this region, you're expected to do a CAMC exam. And that is an exam set by the medical council of the region. They're from CAMC. It has 2 parts. And for Cuban-trained doctors, the difficulty has always been the part 2 of the exam, because you would appreciate they've done all of their training in Cuba, and now they're coming to do clinicals and practicals in an area where they never really practice, and it's often difficult. Once you pass the CAMC exam, you can be registered throughout the Caribbean region. The difficulty over the years is trying to find a system, a process in Barbados that would allow this. It was happening in the countries like Jamaica and Trinidad and Guyana, where they have a number of hospitals, and they would allow these graduates to do locums, not as doctors, but do locums in various hospitals where they got to work, to be exposed to the patients and the management of patients in those entities. This didn't obtain in Barbados. Now we have, with the UE, forged an agreement whereby they would get 6 months of clinical training in the various rotations, medicine, internal medicine, surgery, obs and gyn, pediatrics, and gynecology, and be in a position to sit the CAMC Part 2. CAMC exam they can work along and manage that. I'm going to ask this Chief Medical Officer to perhaps speak a bit more about this. It is a long process, and Cabinet has approved the new process, which was developed by the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and the University of the West Indies.
Thank you. So first, let me say there are not many persons who are who studied in Cuba who required to do the examination. Minister's correct. They need to do the CAMC examination. We are working with the University of the West Indies to do a bit of coaching and mentorship of those students who are graduates of Cuba to pass the CAMC exam, because the CAMC exam is not an easy exam, and therefore there needs to be some hand-holding and preparation for the exam. The university has agreed to assist the Ministry of Health in this process. It is not for free. The Ministry of Health will be paying for the services of University of the West Indies to try to bridge the gap with these students. But the process will start very soon. I don't want the public to feel that there are several Cuban graduates waiting to pass the CAMC exam. I think what has happened over the past few years is that because it was always so difficult to pass the CAMC exam, there have been fewer persons interested in studying medicine in Cuba. Thank you.
My third and last question. Only recently we have you have started the Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc., company responsible for the sustainable pharmaceutical production. So we can have that as part of the dimension in Barbados. And there is a plan, of course, to establish the Barbados Drug Regulatory Authority, which will oversee the safe production, the efficacy of medications. And I think that this is important work, very, very important. It's breakthrough work because we have never been there before in terms of manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. With the advent of zoonotic illnesses and all types of other diseases, we in Barbados may very well be on the threshold of producing that phytopharmaceutical that will be the next treatment for cancer. We may be able to produce something that is used very, very, very importantly for a non-communicable illness. It is very, very important work whether we produce something that can be used locally. I know back in the day, you would hear persons talk about bush tea and other drugs, other products and medicines that the traditional and indigenous people used to use for all types of illnesses. And trust me, they work. Right in our country, in the heart of rustic Barbados, there may be an active principle from our botanical that could be used if the research and the manufacturing processes are here too for an illness and that we are having problems right now treating. I am saying, Minister, that this is important work, this is good work, this is a new venture in your ministry that all Barbadians can be proud of. I would just want you to elucidate on this new dimension and the plans, whether it's for export purposes or local, to have a pharmaceutical industry, a vibrant pharmaceutical industry in Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You are correct. We're embarking on this new matter of the development of pharmaceuticals in Barbados. It's called the Barbados Pharma Inc. The company has now been registered. We have been moving along on a two-track, so to speak. Absolutely, to do full manufacturing in Barbados, you need to reach a regulatory level at the level of BL3. This is under the World Health Organization classification. And we had developed the Barbados White Book, and this looked at the current Barbados drug service capacity as it related to regulatory matters. And it has guides us along the path, looking at all the various bits of legislation and how we can develop a regulatory pathway that will take us to this level of a regulatory framework that is required by WHO. The book was completed in November, and the regulatory framework is being developed the legislation for that by the CPC at this point in time. Meanwhile, we have a CEO and we have also a regulator, a person who will be in charge of a regulator who worked in the Barbados Drug Service for several years. That person has tremendous experience. We are looking at regulatory aspects as it relates to manufacturing pharmaceuticals in the future. We are looking at cancer drugs for chemotherapeutic agents. We are looking at newer medications that can be used in our region, in the South countries, that is Africa, Caribbean. But we're also looking, as we develop the regulatory framework and get to that level, at more simple things. I mean, like certain Collins has been doing for almost over 100 years, I believe. Fill and finish, as they call it, and as it relates to certain pharmaceuticals. And we're looking now to get discussions are ongoing with Collins. I'm not going to get into all details and call in the name of the pharmaceutical that is being looked at, but we are looking at something that has been used for a skin condition for several years, which could potentially, research is showing, have another use as for a certain type of cancer. We're looking at something like that. I'm not deliberately not giving details on that. So those are the sort of opportunities. I should mention at this point in time, along with Pharma Inc., we have also developed the Barbados Living Lab, which is expected to get young researchers and scientists in Barbados involved in the whole process of research and development of new agents. So these are things that are ongoing in the ministry, but not in the forefront at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I just want to say that I want to, again, thank your team and yourself, and to give the public the rested assurance that under your leadership, we are certainly in the right path as it relates to health services in Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I say good afternoon to the Minister and his team. Minister, I'm going to start in perhaps a pretty high-level place, but it is a question that I believe is at the back of or behind the discussion that we're having today. And that is the question of, what is this business of universal health care? What is this notion of universal health care? And the extent to which Barbados can deliver that. And the public expectation of the provision of health services and treatment from primary to tertiary. So we use this notion, we use this language of universal health care quite loosely, I think. And it really has some very specific meanings. And it really talks about a model of inclusion that runs the gamut of everything and all people and all populations at every time in the life cycle. But Minister, sometimes I feel that what we are trying to do here is almost like trying to drink the ocean with a spoon. Because I feel like there is an expectation in our socialized healthcare model. Canada is experiencing the tension. The UK is experiencing the tension where things are breaking. And it's not just that they're breaking despite what the Leader of the Opposition would like to suggest, only in Barbados or because of our management. But really the question is, how much can these resources support? And where should those resources go? It's a difficult conversation. It is a difficult conversation in a population and with a legacy of fully socialized healthcare. and full inclusion. We've come to expect that. It is a noble target, but we have to have some practical conversations. So we have been having conversations today about things like linear accelerators. Now, we know that this is best in class for radiation therapy. Certainly as somebody who has lost my best friend and sister to breast cancer, and having seen how radiation therapy can destroy tissue around the area that you're trying to target, there's no denying that a linear accelerator is something that is worthwhile. We've seen that the maintenance costs and even the personnel costs around it have gone down as the technology has improved and so on. But on the one hand, we have things like linear accelerators and this really high provision of dialysis services and all of these kinds of things, joint replacement surgery, everything that a person might want is on the menu. But then we have to look at the issue of preventative care and primary interventions and the things that will stop a lot of our population from getting to the point of needing dialysis and needing other kinds of intervention. And the question I really have for you, Minister, is how are we balancing that? Honestly, practically, what is the prognosis? What are the prospects for really being able to meet this notion of universal health care in Barbados? And if we cannot, then what are we saying about what the state commits to provide? What are some of the other kinds of partners and interventions that we need to come alongside, including the role of private insurance that I think in some regard is perhaps getting a bit of a pass? So I just wanted to start in that place to perhaps understand the landscape of what we're dealing with, because I think sometimes we talk as if we have all the resources in the world to deliver this universal health care. What should we be doing? Where should we be concentrating? What is the relative investment that we should be making in primary care? I came up going to the Polyclinic. Everything I needed and all the care started for my family at the Polyclinic level. And that is perhaps why, because we had such close surveillance there were other things that we did that did not challenge us later. So I just wanted to hear a bit from you and your team, Minister, about that.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You've touched on a number of areas here that are fairly complex, and we have certainly been looking at and discussing within the ministry. You're touching on universal health coverage. You're dealing with the whole issue and area of health finance, and obviously the two are interlocked. We have been moving slowly on the matter of health financing. We had a committee established. We've had international consultants. We've had a discussion. We looked at the whole matter of health insurance, national health insurance, etc. And it is something that we're engaged with. We're trying to have an opportunity to present this to Cabinet for full discussion. I think you recognize that the issue obviously has to be finding probably a special day, a special Cabinet meeting to go through this. It is not straightforward. A lot of questions, a lot of decisions will have to be made as relate to the financing of healthcare and the utilization of national health insurance. If you're going to offer everything, as you said, or if you're going to be looking at a package that is going to be offered to all the citizens, those are the sort of discussions that will be needed. As it relates to the universal health coverage, I think that we, through our socialized healthcare over time, have been working in this direction, even without the phrase universal health coverage. Essentially, we are providing healthcare in Barbados from cradle to grave. It's available. But we also have to look at the issues of affordability of this healthcare. we have the issues here that I raised, for example, earlier, as it related specifically to mammograms, and they are available, but people can't afford them. So are they really available? In universal health coverage, things that you move to a system where the whole issue of having healthcare doesn't pauperize individuals. So it becomes very complex and very difficult to go through. We have been dealing with it in the ministry, and I'm going to ask the two experts on this matter, the Chief Medical Officer and the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, to perhaps very complicated matter, one that has to be addressed in this country in the not too distant future.
Kenneth George, CMO. So from how I see it, universal health care is the concept wherein we provide health care for the citizens of the country without putting them into financial stress. No individual should be left behind. But the concept has changed, and particularly when we speak about free movement of people within the region. If you speak about universal health care, you will have to provide a type of service for those individuals too. I think the challenge, universal health care is a destination. You all try to move towards that goal. And I think the World Health Organization and PAHO understand it's a process, a journey to try to get to this destination. I think countries have to make decisions about what they can provide with respect to their concept of universal health care. We are not, as a small island developing state, going to be able to provide everything for everybody. Difficult decisions will therefore have to be made. But certainly there are some areas from a public health perspective which will be a no-brainer: maternal and child health, immunization services, NCD prevention and control, tuberculosis management, HIV management, etc. So I think the ministry remains committed. The discussions will have to continue, and it will be an ongoing discussion trying to correct a problem which is based in inequities in healthcare, inequities. I don't know if Dr. Phillips has any further comment.
I think both Minister and CMO spoke in fair amount of detail to the situation. What I will add is that while it is a complex undertaking to define what's the package of care, who gets it, and at what cost, I think Barbadians have shown that as a people, we are up to the challenge of tackling difficult issues. The population is very aware and very willing to be engaged, and I think that it will be worthwhile for us to seek to navigate the process of defining what is delivered, what can be best delivered at quality and at appropriate volume, and to whom and at what cost. I think these are important discussions to have, and I think Barbados will benefit from going through the process of navigating this.
Thank you. I understand that it's a difficult conversation. This is a follow-up comment as I move into my second question, Chair. I understand that this is a difficult conversation, but we are talking as if we have the luxury of time. We are here in estimates discussing this very tension between the different things you have to spend on. So the conversation is here. We may not be ready, but the conversation is here. It is material to what we are talking about now. Because I do think that the investment in preventative care, and I know I'm talking about moral suasion, I'm not talking about just PSAs and that kind of thing. I mean real investment in early years, preventative measures. Real things like compliance to treatment protocols earlier on. And again, doctors can provide diet, can prescribe diet, you know. Sometimes we seem to think that we can't do that. But being able to give patients an indication of what are the measures that they can take that will start to treat them before they get to the point of needing these interventions, I still feel that we're not making those investments properly. And then we scramble around a medical aid scheme and getting more money to fly people out with once-in-a-lifetime illnesses. And I do not want to suggest that we do not need to care for all Barbadians. We do. But we have to make some decisions about the balance of the investment and where we get the most mileage. I do not think that we're having those conversations, and we are kicking the can down the road as if we have all the time in the world to do that. You would know better than me that we don't. But it brings me to my second question, which has to do with how we're optimizing the resources that we do have. And, you know, notwithstanding, and I do not in any way want to minimize the challenges that we as Barbadians are experiencing at Queen Elizabeth Hospital and with our system in general. Notwithstanding those challenges, I think QEH and the healthcare system in Barbados has distinguished itself in the region for the kind of care that it does provide. And I think some of your recent studies have borne that out. So my question really is on how we are maximizing the facilities that we do have and the human resources that we have in the system. I don't know if my information is dated. It may be, and Minister, you are in the best position to correct me, but you have a system where I believe that consultants may still be offered, 20 hours a week in terms of how they are engaged. And we also have a situation where we have operating theaters that are open for part of the day. And I wonder if it may not be possible to incentivize those consultants as part of their contract or what they do to have access to OT hours and in that way keep their skills in the hospital in a way that can be of more benefit to the public. Similarly, we have this notion of a 24-hour model for the hospital. I don't know where we are with that. I would love to hear from you, Minister, on that, because to me, the only state hospital would have to find itself working in a 24-hour environment or a 24-hour way. We have a 24-hour A&E, I think. But if I come to A&E and the ancillary staff are not there to clean up what might spill on the ground, and the pharmacy is not open, then what is 24-hour about it? So I wanted to hear from you, Minister, one, on that question of the operating theaters and whether we're really maximizing the revenue that we can get and the availability of those doctors' skills in that scenario. And then where are we with this idea of a 24-hour hospital and what that involves? Because that is going to involve a lot of conversations that you have to negotiate. How do you engage staff? How do you have this rotation of different kinds of categories of work that people traditionally have not been used to doing? Where are we with that kind of resource maximization, Minister?
Thank you. A lot of what you're saying is in fact true. As it relates, I'm going to ask the HR director or the chairman of the board to speak to the. I better start there first, the matter of the 24-hour hospital. This is something that has been contemplated, regrettably, for several years. When I was last Minister of Health, I started this deliberations with the unions about a 24-hour institution. I get the impression that this is not going very far, and we're speaking about doing it now and completing it. And it entails a lot of meetings, staff preparation, interaction with the various unions. I think the whole idea of change management, and it is a matter that the board is actively looking at implementing very shortly. We had discussions about it, serious discussions, even involving the Prime Minister about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, when this whole matter came up. So it is something that we've been looking at. The matter of the consultants working 21 hours a week, I think most people know how I feel about that. Perhaps it's best for the Director of Medical Services to speak about it. That is more so on paper than in practice. There will be very few consultants in the QH who have that luxury of working 21 hours a day. I believe most of them work much more than 21 hours a day. In terms of encouraging them to utilize the theater dead time, it is something that we're also looking at. That's why I said we have 7 theaters working now, normally, daily. And we're looking at moving to 9, as I said, by the end of this financial year, hopefully. And then eventually to utilizing all 12 that they have available. And the plan then was that you would encourage at least 1 or 2 of those theaters to be utilized for private case to get the consultants to start utilizing the QEH for some of their work. The other matter was that we recognize that theaters generally close at 4 or 5. They're not doing anything, any active lists, apart from they're only doing emergencies. We're saying that theaters the list should go to 7 or 8, the normal daily list. To do that, we need anesthetists, and that was the point I made earlier. And we need anesthetists who are trained and ready, that will come and know about anesthesiology and what is required, not people to be trained. You have the surgeons, you have an additional junior doctors. We then need nursing. We have nurses to be done. They're looking at recruiting them now. So the whole idea is to extend the operational hours of the operating theaters in the QH, the main operating theater, to get them doing just close to 12 hours a day, if not more eventually. So those are things that are being actively looked at. The matter of the 24-hour service, that is one that, as I said, I have a history with that. I started that about 17 years ago, and I sincerely hope that when it started the process, the unions have been told already that that is the direction. So I believe that there'll soon be time for the negotiations. I'll probably ask the chairman of the board to speak to that and the director of HR, and ask Mr. Harris to weigh in on the whole matter of the extended hours of the operating theater. These are plans that are currently in train. I take your earlier point again about the whole issue of the cost of healthcare delivery and the way that we've been delivering healthcare. And as I said earlier, I reiterate, that is the one I agree with you. We have the final documents, but it is a matter for having a full and frank discussion, presentation and discussion at the cabinet level.
Nigel Whitehall. So, QEH board has instructed the management to meet with the unions and to determine a path toward a 24-hour work system within the institution. Ms. Rees, who heads the HR department, she was here. Unfortunately, she is not feeling well and is unable to address the issue at this stage. Nevertheless,
The institution aims to meet with the unions and to ensure that we have a 24-hour system in place as soon as is practicable. Communications has already been sent to the various unions representing the workers, and we expect that negotiations will start in the very near future. Thank you.
Anthony Harris, Director of Medical Services. Excuse me. As it relates to the 21 hours for consultants at the hospital, their contract actually reads that they're required to produce a minimum of 21 hours of service. This is rooted back in the way that consultants or specialists first came to the hospital, and it was certainly a way to attract and retain specialist doctors at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Suffice to say, we have already started the engagement, as the chairman of the board has indicated, with the union affecting the doctors, the BANP, about a change and an understanding of this, so that is something in progress. I wouldn't like to prejudice the proceedings by even giving a personal opinion on that at this time, but it is something that we have to look at because the old system is going to be required to change. Now, the other thing, of course, is that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has been seeing a greater number of not just general specialist doctors, but subspecialty doctors who now can do fancier things and stuff like that, like hepatobiliary surgery. And we are going to have to find creative ways of how we engage such specialists for the service of the public. I think it is, as we look at how the hospital is a 24-hour system, we do have, in effect, a 24-hour system. There are some areas that will need to work a kind of a shift system to ensure greater coverage of the hospital over 24 hours. But things like the lab, X-ray departments, housekeeping stuff by a shift system is already working 24 hours, but there is going to have to be some improvement and increase in some of the hours that some of these departments provide.
Additionally, we are in progress of totally assessing, especially the clinical departments that need to reflect a 24-hour on-site presence in the facility and to differentiate of what on-call is as opposed to on-site. On-site has the implications of oversight in real time and also as a potential addition to helping, in the case of junior staff, making key critical and clinical decisions. I can tell you that one department, when I came 2 years ago, was pharmacy, and which has made a nice transition from being almost on call after 4 p.m. every day to now having presence on site. And if you can only imagine at 2 o'clock in the morning, if a patient needs a critical drug that in the past, we would have to call someone in at that hour to get that medication. But the presence of on-site makes the world of difference in terms of us meeting the timeliness of our patient care services.
I thank you for the responses to both questions, although I am left feeling that We have been very long in the process on some matters, with respect to both issues, quite frankly. And these are existential matters for you, Minister, and for the hospital and for healthcare in Barbados. And I hope that by the next time we come here to have these conversations, we have some more definitive responses. My last question is perhaps a bit straightforward. It has to do with your environmental health services program. And somehow, Minister, perhaps it is my own intellectual failing that I sometimes don't grasp. The division of labor, in some ways, across certain departments. There's health, there's environment. There are perhaps duties that overlap. Certainly in my constituency, sometimes things come up, one hardly knows who to call. I don't like to go to a good old days conversation because sometimes you realize that the good old days weren't as good as you thought. But I do recall that one would see environmental health inspectors very often, and their role was in many ways almost preventative. Even before you had infestations of various kinds of vermin, they would give counsel to communities on how to manage certain issues. It seems to me that now we often find ourselves in a place where there is some critical environmental health matter happening in a community. And I don't feel that we have the level of surveillance that we once did, and often I'm not sure what is the resource and what is the prevention approach so that we're not just outing fires constantly, whether it is with derelict buildings or with overgrown lots or with mechanic shops. You know, I feel as if the orderly development of the country is at risk in that area. So I wanted to get some clarity on that. What should Barbadians expect in terms of coverage of the officers in that area? But then also to understand the division of labor, even with things like the National Agricultural Food Control Agency that were discussed earlier in these estimates under that head. Because I also think sometimes that there's this overlap that hurts the coordination of government in what we have to do. The officers spoke very clearly at that time about this issue of turf. And I find that not very palatable to think that we are governing or seeking to govern based on turf. So I wanted to get some understanding of the role of that program, the coverage to make sure that we don't have some of these issues, and then just a general comment on how we are coordinating with other agencies to deliver for people, because that's what we're here to do.
Thank you, Minister. I have with me the Chief Environmental Health Officer and the Deputy Chief this evening, and I'm sure that the questions that you just asked, especially as it related to catchment area and coverage, are ones that they're very familiar with, and I'm going to ask them to speak to them, and then we'll come to the other areas, because I myself have expressed some concerns.
Good afternoon, I'm Francina Bascom, Chief Environmental Health Officer. In terms of the question, in terms of coverage of our catchment areas, what you would have found in the past, we had a full complement of staff who would have been very visible within the communities. What you have found that over time, what has happened, we have been focusing on some of the other areas where you have like Port Health, where persons who would have previously in the field, where we had about 7 or so persons who made up that team, we now have 20 persons assigned to Port Health. We also have persons assigned to processing plants. So that takes up a number of our officers. So we don't have as much officers to cover the areas as we did in the past. And in addition to that, we would also be short of officers. We don't have a full complement of officers. Even we are probably short of about like 20 environmental health officers based on our established posts. We also have the team of environmental health assistants. And we too, in terms of our established posts, we don't have our full complement to go into the district. So that sometimes accounts for why persons would say they are not seeing the environmental health officers, but they are there in the community, but probably not as frequent as persons used to see them in the past. We do try to cover our entire catchments in Barbados through all the districts. We do make that effort, but I think sometimes some of them would not be covered, and we do prioritize areas in some instances, and the officers visit those areas. But we are still out there in the community. In terms of our role is still a preventative role, but I believe based on what you have said, Minister, in that we are probably not covering as much of the area as frequently as we used to. There may be some situations that would get out of hand, and then we have to come in and address them after the situation has occurred.
Hi, good afternoon. Ronald Chapman, Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer. What I would like to add as well to what Ms. Bascom would have said is that we are working to address these issues with some long-term and some short-term strategies. Presently, there are 17 persons at the Barbados Community College that are being trained in environmental health. All things being equal, they should be available for hire in the Ministry of Health by the end of this year. So we are looking at filling those ranks as soon as possible. We have utilized some of those persons who were community health liaison officers during COVID, those persons who would have met the criteria in terms of qualifications. Some of those persons were brought on into the environmental health ranks, and they are on as doing the work of environmental health assistants, and they're doing so quite admirably. Also, what have been put in place in the short term, there has been a complaints center, and I think that complaint center did not necessarily arise out of a need for health, but what it has been doing, it has been allowing Barbadians to send in their issues, and those issues are being directed to the Ministry of Health. So persons are now encouraged to be a bit more vocal in letting us know what is happening out there, and we have been responding. The other thing that we have been doing, and I think a lot of persons would have seen this, is that we have stepped up our enforcement efforts. And we have been seeing some fruit in that regard. And those enforcement efforts have been allowing us to tackle a lot of outstanding problems and put them to bed rather quickly. So although we've had a lot of attrition in the past, and we've had a long period where we didn't have officers trained, we are presently addressing the issues. Thank you.
I'm Kenneth George again. I just would like to add, many of you are aware that we are taking on a major public health undertaking with the Cricket World Cup. And the responses of environmental health to keep this country safe cannot be understated. We are currently doing training in outbreak investigation, and the major issue for me from a public health perspective is food safety. We must ensure that the food supply in Barbados, when we have thousands of visitors coming to the island, is extremely, is brought to a level that we don't have food outbreaks during this activity. With respect to vector control, they play an absolute and critical role. Many of you know we are just coming out of the dengue fever outbreak, and I think to support the environmental health department, they instituted a significant fogging campaign, which I believe has had some effect on dampening the transmission and growth of the adult mosquito. So the issue of the other major area which the environmental health officers are concerned with is vector control in rodents, which continues to plague some areas within Bridgetown and the South Coast. But as with any public health intervention, you can't only rely on the public health inspector. You need to have the public on your side to make sure that you can have change in the society. So the call from me is that while we certainly need a more visible face from the environmental health department, we cannot do interventions on our own, and we'll need the cooperation of the public. Thank you.
I believe there were some other areas raised by Minister in relation to overgrown lots and the treatment of those lots. In relation to Ministry of Health and Wellness, our responsibility is that we will serve notices on the owners of the lots. The Ministry and give the owners time to clean their lots. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has no resources to clean vacant lots. And this seems to be what is required, is expected of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. But we don't have any resources to clean lots. We will serve notices on the owners. The responsibility to clean lots is the owner of the lot. In recent time, Mr. Chapman would have started his enforcement, and we have some cases before the law courts in relation for our owners to clean their lots. Mr. Chapman will be able to speak to that program that he would have started.
Ronald Chapman, Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer. As said before, we have started to address the issue of overgrown vegetation. In fact, we've been addressing the issues of all nuisances and all health violations comprehensively. What the process basically is, and the inspectors go out, they find violations to the health services regulations, they serve a notice. That notice is in writing. Persons are given a specific amount of time to address the issue. Once that issue has not been addressed within that time, then that person is warned that they may or may not be prosecuted. Those persons, those violations are then taken before the law court, where there is a trial by magistrate. These are summary matters. So we have had a number of those. In fact, I have another 12 in my office to put in next week. So those cases are going apace. We've had a number of judgments in the favor of the Ministry of Health and
sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think for the benefit of the chamber, Mr. Chapman should say that he's speaking about overgrown lots being dealt with under the current health regulations.
Thank you. You said that, I didn't hear that, so I'm sorry.
You were talking about nuisances, and you're not telling the chamber that you have been prosecuting people who have overgrown lots and who are not dealing with them. That is what the ministry has been actively doing.
Yes, sir. So, yes, well, I did mention the word nuisances broadly, but a lot of those prosecutions have been for overgrown lots. It has been a hot button topic on the news. A lot of the complaints which come into the environmental health department are for overgrown vegetation, overgrown lots. And we have been working very assiduously in dealing with these issues. As I said, we've had a number of judgments, and we've had a number of lots cleared once we've served notices. So we continue to work in this area, and we continue to ensure that the health services regulations are kept, are adhered to. As I said, yes, we are in the process of training inspectors, but in the meantime, we are working to get the issues solved.
Thank you. I did hear a response briefly from CMO in terms of food safety for things like upcoming cricket. Is that what I heard? But I didn't hear a more long-term response about this notion of establishing a National Agricultural Food Control Agency and the role of the Ministry of Health in that. This is a long-term intervention that makes sure that food that is both grown here and is imported for consumption by Barbadians and those who live here is safe. And what we heard from the Ministry of Agriculture earlier was that there was some kind of tension or lack of clarity in terms of the responsible agency. This is meant to be a multi-agency institution. So I just wanted to give this ministry the opportunity to say something about that. And then, Chairman, I will not need to come in again once that answer is given.
So on a daily basis, we inspect thousands of pounds of food stuff coming through our ports of entry. And that has always been a public health function. And that's one of the reasons why we have a strong public health presence at our ports of entry, because that's also where our food stuff comes. Now, I am aware that the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for food security, and they also have a shared responsibility for food safety. So I don't believe there's a tension. We can work this out, just knowing that we have been doing this for years. When the Ministry of Health condemned chicken wings in this country and dumped them, that was based on the Health Services Act, and we could have gone ahead and done that. So when we had to close the areas that were preparing food in Sheraton Center for close to a week, we did it in the interest of the Barbadian population. So we can work together. I think that I'm not aware of the tension, and I will investigate what you have said and see how we can make this happen, because at the end of the day, the interest is to have a safe food supply that persons can be assured they will not have any diarrheal illness. Thank you.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to Her Honor the Deputy Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, we say no. You think the ayes have it.
Honorable members, the chairman has reported progress and has asked for leave to sit again.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with that, we've come to the end of the sitting for today, but I therefore beg to move the suspension of the sitting until Friday at 9:30 a.m., the 15th of March.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until Friday, the 15th of March at 9:30 a.m. The 19th of March? The 19th of March. I had it right. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber is suspended until Friday.